We'll be in Psalm 27 this morning. Well, no doubt you have seen a movie or read a story about a lucky fellow that comes across a magic lamp. And with a little rub of that lamp, a magic genie pops out. And what 3 wishes would you like? Anything you ask is my command. 3 wishes, only you can't wish for more wishes. That's the only rule, right? And I'm sure we've all had occasion to think to ourselves, what if I was that lucky fellow? What if I had the chance to have 3 wishes granted to me? What would I wish for? Would it be gold, riches, fame, trips? What would it be? We've all thought about that. What if you had to narrow it down to just one wish, just one thing? If you could have it, no matter what it was, what would that one thing be? What would you ask for? Well, there was a lucky fella in the Old Testament by the name of Solomon, where God came to him one day, not a fictional magic genie, but the real God of the universe came to Solomon and said, Solomon, whatever you want, what's the one thing you'd like me to do for you? One thing, what is it? And of course, we know Solomon asked for wisdom. He said, if I have to lead these people and be king of this great nation, your people, and lead them, the one thing I want the most is for wisdom. He could have asked for riches and fame and an expanded kingdom and a strong, victorious, undefeatable army. He could have asked for so many different things, but he asked for wisdom. Now, a foolish person is not going to ask for wisdom. If you're asking for wisdom, that means you already got some wisdom to know you need more of it, right? And as I thought about that, where did Solomon get that wisdom he already had? Well, it seems to me the most likely explanation for the wisdom that Solomon already had was probably his daddy. King David, the man after God's own heart, the king prior to him who had raised him up and brought him up in the king's court, and I'm sure in the instruction of the Lord and in the law, and had pleaded with him, as a father does to his son, to turn your eyes to the Lord and look to him and depend on him. And so I think that's likely. But as far as I can recall, I don't remember a time in the life of King David where God came to him and said, hey, David, if there's just one thing, what is it that you'd like me to? I don't think David ever got that opportunity. I'm not sure David ever needed that offer. Because in the Psalm of David, number 27, David says this: one thing I have asked of the Lord. One thing I have asked of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in his temple. See, I think maybe before God could get to David, David got to God and said, God, this is my heart. There's so many things I could ask for, but God, there's one thing that I want most in life. One thing I want you to give me. One thing. And what is it he says? One thing I have asked of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord. There was one place. David asked for one thing, and it was the one place he most wanted to be, in the house of the Lord. Now David had opportunity to travel. He'd been all over the place. He'd kind of been forced into it at some points in his life, fleeing for his life from King Saul. And so he had traveled. He had been around. He had been a lot of different places, probably a lot of neat places, probably a lot of places he would have liked to have returned to. And now, as the king, he's got the resources. He could go anywhere he wanted to go. He could load up in his chariot or wherever and take off and go to any place he'd like. Who's going to stop him? Right? He can send the army out in front of him to clear the way and make sure that it's safe passage. He could send out scouts every which direction and say, I want you to go to the uttermost parts of the earth, find the neatest places, and then come back and report to me so that I can go there and see them for myself. He could have done that. He could have gone to Egypt to see the pyramids, you know. He could have retraced the steps of his ancestors and seen where Abraham had gone to Egypt, and Moses maybe and crossed the Red Sea and Mount Sinai. And, you know, he could have, I don't know if he'd ever heard of Mount Everest, but I guess he could have gone there if he wanted to. But he said, no, there's just one place that I want to be. I want to dwell in the house of the Lord. One place. And he had one petition, just one petition, one thing I have asked of the Lord. I have come to God. I have asked him for just one thing. And you know, we know David. We've read the Psalms. We know that David asked God for a lot of different things. He spent a lot of time in prayer. He asked God for a lot of different things. But right here he says, but there's just one thing that I want the most. If I got just one request, if there's just one thing that I could guarantee that God would grant it to me, it'd be this one thing. One petition, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord. One thing, one place, one petition, one pursuit. Because notice he says, one thing I have asked of the Lord, and that will I seek after. He didn't just ask God and then sit back and wait and just hope that it would happen. He said, I'm going to seek after it. I'm going to put some energy towards this. I'm going to pursue this. One pursuit. Of all the things that I might seek after in life, I've asked God to give me this, and now I'm going to do my part. I'm going to seek after this thing. I'm going to pursue it, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord. He pursued it. Because you see, we pursue the things that we desire. We do. If we truly desire something, if we truly want it, we pursue it. We go after it. We spend the time. We spend the energy. We give it our all. And David did that. One pursuit. He had one priority. One priority. There's one thing. One thing. Now, as a king, David was an important man. He was a busy man. He had a lot of things to think about, a lot of things to worry about, a lot of decisions that had to be made. A lot of items on his list to keep straight and keep in order and to keep his priorities straight. But he said, there's one thing at the top of my priority list. I want to dwell in the house of the Lord. All of it together, we see that David had one passion. And what was it? It was God. It was God. Because let's look at what he's really saying. What is he really after here? When he says, I want to dwell in the house of the Lord, what is he really saying? What is it that David wants the most? What's the one thing? That I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Not just one day, not just 2 days. Every day of my life. See, this wasn't just a priority for a little while, but then something else took its place. This wasn't just a pursuit for one season of life, but then something else, that went to the back burner. No, he says, this is my one thing all the days of my life. 2, why do you want to be in the house of the Lord, David? Why is that such a high priority? Why is that your one thing? David says, because of this. I want to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. That's the one place I want to be because this is what I want to do. I want to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord. Notice he didn't say I want to glance at the beauty of the Lord. I don't want to rush into the temple and get my 5-minute devotional real quick and then run back out to the rest of the kingly responsibilities. No, I want to gaze. I want to be there. I want to stay there because I want to spend time focusing my eyes upon the beauty of the Lord. I want to see God. And I want to keep looking and keep looking. And I want to see him more. I want to know him. That's what David is really saying. I want to know God. And then when I've learned, I want to learn more. I want to go deeper. I want to have a closer relationship with God. And I never want to leave that place where God is. This was his passion. This was his one thing, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his holy temple. He wanted to gaze. He wanted to think about what he already knew about God. And he wanted to learn more. He wanted to inquire. He wanted to ask. Notice it says, I want to dwell in the house of the Lord. Now, where would that be in David's time? What is he referring to specifically? One place is the tabernacle. The temple hasn't yet been built. That will be for his son Solomon to take care of. But in his day, there was the tabernacle. He said, I want to spend time in the house of the Lord, in the tabernacle. Why would that be? He says, I want to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord. Well, we know that at times God really did manifest in a visible way His presence, His glory, the Shekinah, and it would come and fill the tabernacle. Maybe David had that in mind. I want to be there because if God shows up and there's something to see, I want to see it. I want to see Him in His glory. I want to behold that. But as far as I can recall, and y'all may have to set me straight on this after the sermon. I didn't spend a lot of time recalling and reading, but I don't remember a time where David ever specifically saw a visible manifestation of God's presence like that. We read occasions where that happened, where certain people, Moses certainly did, and others, they saw the angel of the Lord, or they wrestled with the angel of the Lord, or to Abraham, he set a meal before his 3 visitors. And there are occasions where we can say, that's definitely God, that's probably God, But I can't remember a time where David specifically saw God. So maybe he did. Maybe that's what he was hoping for. I think at the bottom of it, what David is really saying is when I'm at the tabernacle, I'm thinking about God. And when I think about God and who He is, that's beautiful. That's what I want to do. I want to think about God. And of course, I know this crowd knows that the tabernacle, everything about the tabernacle pointed to God. It told about who God was. It told about what God had done in the past. It told about God and things that He was doing in the present. It told about things that God was going to do in the future through His Son, Jesus Christ. And as David looked at all the elements of the tabernacle, all the instruments, the things the tabernacle was made of, the way it was constructed, the activities that were always going on there at the tabernacle, all of it pointed to God and told about how wonderful God was, how powerful God was, how good God was, the promises of God, the presence of God. And all of it, David says, when I look upon that, I see beautiful. I see the beauty of God. I want to gaze on that. I want to keep thinking about that. I want to be constantly reminded of these things of God because it's beautiful to me. It fills my soul. It fuels my heart. I want to be there. The tabernacle was the place where the sacrifices went on. And David could remember about how he was a sinner who needed to be forgiven of his sin. David would, of course, love to be in the presence of other people who loved God. That's where the priests were. That's where people who knew God the best would be, and he could talk to them and they could ask questions of each other and discuss and have their Bible studies. That's where the law was, where he could remember what God had said. All of these different things, I think David wanted to be there because of all these things, because that was gazing upon the beauty of the Lord. Just the previous chapter, 26 and verse 8, also a psalm of David. He says, "O Lord, I love the habitation of your house and the place where your glory dwells." But was the tabernacle the only place that God was? Did David think that that was the only place in the whole world where he could actually meet with God? I don't think it was. I think he knew, just like we know, that God is everywhere. He's omnipresent. Anytime you want to talk to God, you can talk to Him. Anywhere you are, God is. And David knew that. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for Thou art with me." You're with me there. I know you are. In Psalm 19, David said, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. David knew that when he walked outside and he looked up at the moon and the stars and the planets and the comets, and he saw the glory of that space out beyond our planet, he knew he was looking at God. He was seeing the glory of God, the power of God, the wisdom of God, the goodness of God. He says, when I look at the heavens, I see you. When I'm out in the pasture with sheep and shepherds tending their sheep, I see God. No matter where David looked, he saw God. No matter where David went, he knew God was there. In Psalm 139, David says, when I rise up, you're there. When I lie down, you're there. If I take the wings of the morning and fly away, you're there. No matter where I go, if I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. You're everywhere. Psalm 63. In Psalm 63, again a psalm of David. O God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. So I have looked upon you in the sanctuary, beholding your power and glory. And then verse 6. He says, when I remember you upon my bed and meditate on you in the watches of the night. So David starts the psalm. He says he's thinking about the sanctuary, the temple, the tabernacle. He knows he can go there and he can find God. But he says, but when I'm in bed in the morning, when I haven't mustered up the strength yet to get out of bed, I'm already thinking about you. At night, when I can't move another muscle and I plop down in the bed, but I'm not quite yet asleep, I'm thinking about you. I'm meditating on you. I am gazing upon the beauty of the Lord when I'm in my bed, because God, you are there. No matter where he went, he knew God was there. And he wanted to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord. That was the one thing he wanted. David also had one fear, I think. Back in Psalm 27, verse 8, he says, you have said, seek my face. And my heart says to you, Lord, your face, O Lord, do I seek. Hide not your face from me. He says, God, please do not hide your face from me, because the one thing I want is to see you, to see your face, to think upon you, to be with you, for you to be in my life, to be real in my life. So please do not hide your face from me. That's the one thing I can't live with. In this Psalm, chapter 27, you're probably familiar with it. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Though an entire army encamps against me. David says, I've got enemies. And if I'm surrounded by my enemies, which he sometimes was, David's life was many times in danger. But in the midst of this psalm where David is crying out to God as his strength, his salvation, he's got enemies, he knows he needs God to save him and spare his life. Even in the midst of thinking about the dangers of life, the hardships, the stresses of being king, he just, in the very middle of that, comes up, but God, there's really just one thing I really want from you the most. I want you. I want you. And then he kind of goes back and thinks about his enemies again. And then he comes back again to, my heart earnestly seeks after you. God, don't hide your face from me. He didn't ask, don't let the enemies kill me. The one thing I fear the most is not having you. God, my enemies can kill me. And guess what? If they do, I get to be with you. So I can live with that. What I can't live without is if you were to hide your face from me. Remember in Psalm 51, David's prayer to God when he had committed sin with Bathsheba, and the prophet Nathan comes to him and confronts him about that, and David he's made aware of his sin. And he comes before God Have mercy on me, O God. That great psalm, Psalm 51. And in verse 11, he says this, God, cast me not away from your presence, and take not your Holy Spirit from me. God, please don't do that. Please, God, I have sinned. Please create in me a new heart. Cleanse me, wash me with hyssop, and I will be made clean. God, please don't cast me out of your presence. Please don't take away your Holy Spirit from me. That's the one thing I cannot tolerate. David was a man after God's own heart.